Εξομολογήστε το Κύριο διαγρατός, αλληλούια, ότι στον αιώνα το έλεος αυτού, αλληλούια.
Theodosius, around 380 AD, ordered them all collected and banned Mithraism. And it was one of the most efficient document destructions in human history.
We still have the primary sources.
No, you don't. They've got some primary resources today, which are primarily the Mithraeans, which are caves that have been discovered by archaeologists. They were buried under the ground. That's the only reason they survived, because they're literally buried under the ground. Everything above the ground is the most efficient destruction probably in human history. Every trace of Mithraism, I mean, it was true. Historia damnatio, which was the Latin term, means erase all memory.
So, I suppose when I mean secondary sources, I mean like much latter scholarship, like 20th century. I would read that there should be like a quotation from these primary texts of literature source around that time.
This is what we have. This is why we know we have some Christian writers, and the Christian writers, I think one of them is, do you know the highest authority in early Christianity was institutional?
Would be the Catholic Church of Papacy.
No.
The Roman Pontiff.
Much later.
For Christianity.
Christianity, yeah.
Are you talking about Western Christianity, Eastern Christianity?
Well, there is only Western Christianity. It's supposed to have come from the West.
Well, I mean, you have the Eastern Orthodox side, and you have the Roman Catholic side historically.
So, I mean, West Eurasia, the whole of the Middle East, western part of the Middle East, to the whole
and
of
you're
Europe.
saying the highest Christian authority?
Highest Christian institutional authority in early Christianity. That's the beginning of
That would be the Roman Catholic Church.
The Roman Catholic Church didn't practice Christianity until Constantine introduced it.
Well, Constantine
until he imposed it, actually.
Okay, so the Roman Catholic Church is constituted by the bishops of Rome, which proceed from Peter, then Linus, Anacletus, and the lines.
Which Peter do you mean? Peter of the Bible?
The Peter of the Bible, yes.
That's impossible.
Why?
Peter of the Bible is a very early source. He's supposed to be a major source for early Christianity. In fact, he's supposed to have written some of the New Testament.
Do you know what I'm saying that Peter was?
The Peter, the disciple of Jesus.
Yeah,
you
but
mean
do you
that
know?
Peter?
No, yes. Do you know what I'm saying that he was?
Sorry?
Do you know what I'm saying that he was?
He was what?
The first bishop of Rome. Okay? So what the Roman Catholic Church is constituted of is that line of popes, or what is known as the Bishop of Rome. It's not something that's invented with Constantine. For example, like St. Clement, we have his writings. Like First Clement is universally accepted as a Clementine authorship by scholarship, and he is Peter, Linus, Anacletus, Clement. So he would be the fourth pope of the Roman Catholic Church, 2nd century before Constantine, who writes about Christianity.
Okay, there's a very big problem with this narrative, because it's generally agreed that the first and highest institutional authority in the history of Christianity is it's a difficult word to pronounce, even I'm not sure how you pronounce it. It's the Catechetical School of Christianity in Alexandria. And the second highest...
I don't think that's
Let me finish. This is, you go to Wikipedia, my friend. The second highest authority in the history of Christianity is Antioch, and that was established by the one in Alexandria. And the whole thing.
Do you have a source for that, by the way?
You go to Wikipedia. It's not disputed.
Wikipedia is not a credible source.
I agree. There's a lot of people going there and then inserting stuff, and it ends up being a little bit of noise.
Because I'm giving you the primary documents. Like, for example, if we're talking like 4th or 5th century Christianity, I could quote to you the Council of Constantinople, which says that the see of the Roman Church is the highest see in the first canon.
Around 300 AD, my friend.
Yeah, well, what time period are you alluding to?
We're talking about the birth of Jesus to about 100 AD.
Okay, what Okay.
I mean,
sorry,
not the birth of
century then.
Jesus, not the birth of Jesus. The missionary activity of Jesus, right the way past his death to about 100 AD.
Okay, so first century sources. What's your first century source to say that these are the highest authoritative positions in Christianity?
Okay, so in the catechetical school, Christian school of Alexandria, there are a set of bishops.
Yes.
And I think the first one
Saint Mark
is, yes, correct, Saint Mark.
from Alexandria.
And then there is a succession of them.
Yes.
Yeah? And it goes on all the way through for hundreds of years, yes?
It still exists today, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So, okay, great, fantastic. So we can agree that it existed. We can agree that there is a first bishop.
Well, we can agree.
We
I'm agreeing with you insofar that the Church of Alexandria existed in the first century, yeah. I'm not so sure that I'm agreeing with you that it was the highest authority in Christianity, especially considering that Roman Catholics are going to claim that the papal authority has always been the highest and most supreme.
I think it may be a little bit inaccurate to call it a church. It wasn't a church. It was a university. It was a school, a university school. It wasn't really a school because we think school you teach
you
children.
have the University of Alexandria, but you also have the church there as well.
The catechetical school of Alexandria was not a church. It was a university.
Okay, so I'm specifically referring to, because you mentioned the bishopric of Alexandria,
Yes.
I'm specifically referring to the institutions that those bishops were in control of and a part of. The university itself,
right.
I don't believe St. Mark was.
You're right, he
governor
was,
over.
his title was bishop. I'm not sure if that was retrospectively assigned as his title by the people later on, because later on they were definitely being called bishops, and they may have retrospectively given the same honorific title to the ones who came before. But my reading is that was where the Christianity emanated from.
What is the Christianity?
The religion of Christianity. Including
is that like the set of constitutional beliefs that Christians
That's probably
believe,
where the New
referring to?
Testament was written.
Okay.
That's probably where it was attached to the Old Testament.
What time
and
period are you saying it was wrote in?
It's a very good question. There's no consensus. You're sure you're aware of it? Yeah. I'll just have to wrap up because we're going for a walk.
Okay.
But I'm just a historian, like to study history. So there's no consensus on when the New Testament was written. It's an open question. It's quite disputed.
I think that
by
there
historians.
are good intrinsic evidences within the text to make us believe that it was a first century text, and it was wrote by people who are at least familiar with Palestinian geography.
Yes, I agree. We can agree. We agree with it.
Yeah. So, for example, like in Matthew's Gospel, right? Matthew records a currency exchange for the temple tax with Jesus.
Yes.
Right. But someone who's a century later wouldn't know how the number of I forget the currency that they had at the time, but they wouldn't know the
shekels.
Shekels,
Shekel,
yeah. They wouldn't know the tax of it or the conversion rate a century later, right? We also have in John's Gospel, John records the geography of certain parts of the Bible. So, for example, like going up to Capernaum and certain places like this, John specifically uses language like going up here, going down here, which actually matches the geography of ancient Palestine in the ways in which you're going. So we can agree that it's first century authorship, and they are at least Jewish and familiar with Palestinian geography.
Yes, we agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why?
Yeah, go on.
So why are we saying then that this is like? I'm unfamiliar with what you're trying to argue for here. Are you trying to say that this text is manufactured fakely in Egypt?
I'm not saying. No, okay. Manufactured has a negative connotation to it, as in it implies that. I'm not critical of Christianity. Yes. I don't have an agenda against it. So what I'm just trying to do is find out the origins of the religion in order to better understand it.
Yes.
That's all where I'm coming from. Just with an honest, open-minded, historical
I appreciate that, yeah.
So my reading, I know that you're, obviously, a lot of people have this great emotional attachment to Rome. The papacy is based there, and there is the figure of this leader of the Christian church there. And all Christianity was originally centered around Rome.
Yep.
So Nevertheless, that happened later on, 3rd century, and it does look...
Well, I don't think that's a 3rd century accretion, though.
Okay.
Because
So this is
I
where
already told you about the bishopric of Rome.
Yes.
We've already agreed that comes from the 1st century. All that we're really referring to when we're talking about, I believe you're referring actually to the 4th century, right? Constantine.
Yes, okay,
So
300,
so 4th century.
300s, the 300s.
Yeah, the 300s. Okay. So I think all we're really referring to in the 300s is one, the Edict of Milan in 316 maybe the Edict of Milan was, which is just when Constantine legalized Christianity, and then I guess you're referring to the Council of Nicaea after that. But Nicene theology is found in Christian writers that date far prior to that, like St. Gregory the Wonder Worker has a very staunch Trinitarian theology. Irenaeus does as well.
Yeah,
So
I agree with you. I agree with you
Okay.
about the Trinity.
Yes.
Because the Trinity is right there in Alexandria.
Okay.
Yep, it's right there. And but I've got to wrap up.
Are
So
you
my
referring
last
to
point,
Neoplatonism, perhaps, as something that you're trying to say it took from Alexandria?
There's a very good YouTube video about ancient Alexandria. There's only one, so if you look it up, ancient Alexandria, I recommend to watch that. And I say if you want to understand the origins of Christianity, you have to look, and biblical Judaism. The evidence for biblical Judaism is even stronger. And there's even a family that we believe financed the creation of Christianity and biblical Judaism. It's the same family.
What's the evidence for that? Sorry.
There are references to it in ancient sources, and that family, I'll give you their name. The family was called the Alexander family. We don't have any detailed information about them beyond
What's
that.
the document that this is wrote in?
I will have to look it up. I'll come back another Sunday. I'll give you that
for
source.
sure.
And the Ptolemies, obviously, you'll definitely...
Because I do just want to make a distinction that there is a distinction between people funding a Christian community and them creating or forging the beliefs of that
the
community.
beliefs are not being forged. No one's acting in bad faith.
Okay,
no
so are you just talking about a financial contribution? Because I wouldn't have a problem with people financially
I would say it's more, they believe that's what they're doing. They genuinely believe in the religion. They have probably converted to the religion.
Yep.
There's evidence that the Alexander family did. We don't know if this is the family of Alexander the Great or not, because it's an
Alexander the Great is like 400 years prior to this.
It's 300 years prior. And we know that we know that there is an Alexander the Fourth, and his tomb has been found. It's been excavated, and there is evidence that he may have practiced a form of biblical Judaism. And if he did, Alexander the IV, son of Alexander the Great.
Alexander the Great built statues of himself for people to worship, right?
Yes,
so
he did.
how could that be reconciled with biblical Judaism then?
This is how
that would be a grave sin.
Just the very last point. This is how we know, because he has only one statue in his tomb. It is the statue of Sabazius. Sabazius, if you look it up, is directly connected to the earliest written records and archaeological records of biblical Judaism. So the original name of the religion of Judaism, it wasn't what you've got in the Bible. This was written much later. This is 100 years before the Bible was even written. The Bible was written around 200 BC. We're talking about 300.
You're talking about the Jewish text.
Yes, I am. Yes.
I don't think that they were originally wrote 200 BC, considering that our earliest manuscripts we can date to around that time period anyway.
Yes.
So you believe that? Well, because I'm not saying that the earliest manuscript that you have a document is when it's wrote. Otherwise, we would date Aristotle to 1100 AD, because that's the earliest manuscript of the Metaphysics. But that's clearly not accurate, right?
It's kind of what we call in debate a straw man argument. You know, there's only
I thought that was the point you were making.
It's the first time you've used a rhetorical trick. Well, otherwise you've been very good.
I'm not trying to. It's just because it sounded to me like the point that you were making was that when the Dead Sea Scrolls was written is when we have our earliest manuscript is when the text is actually originally wrote at.
Yes, yeah. You see they want to go for a walk.
Okay, sorry.
But thank you very much for your time.
No worries.
You're one of the best debaters here.
I'm not. I don't really consider myself much of a debater, but God bless you.
Well done.
Okay,
thank
no
you.
worries. I guess I'll just wrap up for the camera, and I do want to get in on that discussion in a minute, but
great.
We'll have a look. I might be done for the day.
Okay, that's great. It's quite cold. Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot. See you. Bye then.
So the gentleman wanted to discuss about Osiris, Mithras, and Horus and its influence on early Christianity. So I think one thing that most people should keep clear of is make sure the person you're discussing with is always using primary sources. And the gentleman was very nice, but notice that he didn't give any primary sources that demonstrate a similarity that seems to denote a copying of Christianity from Mithras, right? So, for example, you'll see people say Mithras was born of a virgin on December 25th, da-da-da-da-da. Go to the manuscripts, that's not actually the case. Horus, they'll do the same thing with Osiris. But if you actually read the earliest documents about these things, that's not actually the case that the Osiris or Horus were born from virgins, born on December 25th, da-da-da-da-da, etc., right? Which is why we should always ask, what's the primary source document that you're getting this from? Because you're saying that first century Christianity is what copies its beliefs from here. Now, he made some further claims about Egypt, which, although we do have a bishopric very early on in Egypt from St. Mark, we have the chain that dates all the way till today, I don't think that it's necessary to say that Egypt was always the primary or the highest source in Christianity in the church. Usually from what I've read, that would be Rome, you could argue Antioch, etc. But yeah, also with regards to the New Testament, he agreed that the New Testament is wrote by someone familiar with Palestinian geography, it is wrote by someone who is in the first century, and it's wrote by somebody who's Jewish because they have a very large familiarity with Jewish texts and what they're quoting. So if all these things are the case, I don't see how we could state that it's a later accretion that was made up in Egypt or something of that effect, right? So I don't think that's the case, and we have plenty of evidence for this. We have very good evidence as well that the New Testament, especially the Gospels, are wrote quite early on and wrote in the first century. For example, Luke's Gospel and the book of Acts that Luke also authors is good evidence of this, because in Luke's book of Acts, he notes a change in procurator from Felix to Festus at the end of his book. However, the book ends on a cliff note or a cliffhanger, right? Paul is being put on trial at the end of the book of Acts, and we don't actually get to see the verdict of the book of Acts to note whether he's killed or not. That is likely because the book of Acts actually ends or is finished being wrote before this verdict comes out. And this is something that would be, we would expect of New Testament authors to denote the verdict. For example, anytime Judas is introduced in the New Testament, it's usually noted that this is Judas, the one who betrays Christ, right? So we would expect the author to say, and Paul was put on trial, eventually did not or did die from the result of that trial, etc. So due to the change in procurator in that book, we know that this was 62 AD. However, we also know that Matthew, Mark, Luke, at least the synoptics, were wrote prior to the book of Acts. So if that's the case, we can at least date all three of the synoptic gospels and the book of Acts at least 62 AD or prior. Then you have other evidence from the book of Mark and Matthew, etc., with certain historical details. Luke especially has a lot of historical details throughout his writings. John in John chapter 5 has historical details about the pool of Gethsemane, etc. So there are very good reasons to date the Gospels quite early. So then the question is why is the gentleman saying that this is a later accretion that copies off of certain other beliefs? I don't find this to be the case. I find that these are beliefs which are historically grounded in the historical Jesus, and that's what we read about in the New Testament. And I think that from my research, at least, and the evidence that I've given here, that seems to be the case. Unfortunately, I couldn't discuss with him for longer because he had to go. I did really want to dig into Mithra and Osiris, etc., because there's no similarities there. But with that being said, it's Thomas Apologia. That was my discussion with that gentleman. God God bless.
الرب قوموا يا شعوب ها هو آت ليدين الكون ويرعى القطيع ها إن الكون يهدر ويصيح تهدر وتصيح الأرض والسماء ما فائدة الذهب والفضة فليندثرا ولتشرق أنت يا